All right, good morning, everyone. I love to see many familiar faces, but before we get there, I want to introduce myself. My name is Ernesto Fonseca, and I am the Chief Executive of Hacienda CDC. Probably many of you know about Hacienda, and some of you, I don't know if you're familiar with Hacienda, but just to tell you quickly about our organization, it is a social organization. We've been around for about 30 years. We're not known necessarily as developers, even though we own a small portfolio of about 381 units up until about 7 years ago when I started it. At that point, we revamped our development efforts, and we are doing about 800 units right now as we speak. So we have revamped in a very serious way our image as developers, within the Portland and the Oregon community. We also were known for being just in Northeast Portland with a couple of scattered other sites. But since then, we are in Hillsborough, we're in Beaverton, a couple of locations. We are in Oregon City, and we're working right now in Tillamook as well as in Hermiston, both in Umatilla as well as Hermiston itself. In addition to the development services that we provide, we also provide additional services such as education, after-school programming, small business development, and mortgage lending on a program called 2080. So we lend the 20% and a partner lender lends the other 80%. We do the underwriting together, and then we help families get their first home or refinance, some of their properties. So that's in a nutshell. I've been in Portland for 7 years, and it's been a really fantastic ride. Not necessarily the smoothest, as typically goes, when you come into a different city, but it's been good. I have received a lot of support, and if it wasn't for many parents like you, we wouldn't be in this place. Now, what we are going to discuss this morning is primarily as to what has been our experience in negotiating and creating partnerships. Before we get also to the specifics of what we have experienced as developers, I got to tell you as to why I started doing this whole partnership situation, with our developers. As you heard before, we had a hiatus of many, many years of really not doing any projects or any developments, which meant that we didn't have the infrastructure, we didn't have the staff, we didn't have the expertise in the house for us to really do real estate development in a serious way. So at that point, my only options, having very few reserves in the organization, my only option was to find somebody that wanted to partner with me. And to be entirely frank, at the beginning, I approached a couple of friends, now friends, back then I was just meeting them, and asked them if they wanted to partner. None of them wanted to partner. Literally, some of their words were, no, we don't do that, we just do our own projects. That's super interesting because a couple of years later, the same OHCS decided that points were going to be given to partnerships with organizations that were partnering with organizations of color, such as Hacienda CDC, Bienestar, FHDC, and others. So, what I was proposing became the rule, for us to be gaining more and more projects. For me, I was very lucky to have some friends again in Arizona. I know I talk a lot about Arizona, which is where I came from, but a director of programs at LISC, which is a competitor of Enterprise, they introduced me to another developer from Arizona that, eventually moved to the Portland metro area, Community Development Partners. So this guy came over and said, you guys should work together. You have a lot to gain from each other. And we were, at that point, collaborating and working together. It was that trust that this person from Arizona brought to us that really helped us to make this happen. And it really made a huge difference, for us. We ended up developing a 224 complex in the community of Rockwood in Gresham. And it's been, and a snowball, from that point. That project, we have a small stake on that project. a big stake, as owners and the voice of the project, but a small stake on the financing side, as well as the benefits of that financing arrangement that we made. So that was my first experience in creating these partnerships, and it was a really good one. We have had a lot of great successes after that. We finished Las Adelitas. We won another project in Walker Road, with Hillsborough. We're going to be starting another project in Lake Oswego, and so on and so forth. The list keeps going on. So back then also, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, as typically goes with any new program or new requirement, many mainstream developers starting approaching other organizations, whether it was El Programa Hispano, whether it was Latino Network, including us, Hacienda, but we were a little pickier because we knew, at least, to some extent what we're doing, but many other organizations didn't. And some of these negotiations or proposals that were being brought to the table were pretty minimalistic, in terms of benefiting the organization that they were trying to partner with. So I started to raise a little bit of an alarm as to why is it that we're doing what we're doing, and what is the benefit really of partnering with these organizations, developers that have all the resources, that have the infrastructure, but yet, they don't have that partnership. They don't have that alliance that will enable them to win that project. So if we start to look at, some of those relationships, we can say safely that the relationship itself is the biggest asset that smaller organization of color or other organization, nonprofit, has for them to really have some leverage, for these projects to succeed. And also, for that project to be awarded in the first place, to the mainstream developer as the lead developer. There are many ways to structure these deals, but I have found a couple of them that are pretty significant. So I want to share, those experiences, but before we go there, I want to know if anybody here is from the nonprofit sector, as in anybody has been approached also, from a developer to partner with any of you. Anybody here? You are with El Programa, right? With El Programa? Who are you with? SIPA. And anybody else? All right. Well, there are a few of you, obviously, that have either are already partnering, or people are trying to partner with you. So let's start with the first slide, and I want to really stress these particular 2 points, as to what the organization does or doesn't do, and what are the values, that you bring to that partnership. For us, it was pretty simple. We're developers. At least I was a developer in Arizona, so I felt very strong that we needed to revamp our development efforts. But many other organizations are not developers. They have never been on that space. They live on programmatic, funding, such as a Programa Hispano. So they have to get a lot of grants. They have to get a lot of contracts with the state, with the county, with the cities that they are serving, in order for them to succeed and to be able to pay for those contracts. So for us, it was a very simple decision, right? So do we share some values with this particular organization? What our mission is? Our mission is really to develop housing and then provide the services for us to help these families succeed. Housing by itself is not enough. Therefore, we are adding those services. And this has been going on for decades, for us in Hacienda CDC. Now, for those organizations that do not do real estate development, they do have a couple of disadvantages when it comes to partnering with some developers, because for the most part, what these developers are looking for is for a service provider that can add some value to the project in addition to resident services. Anybody familiar with what resident service is all about here in this room? All right, so for those that do not know, resident service is simply, having an advocate navigator within each one of the properties is required by the U.S. Department of Housing, as well as by any other organization of housing in every single state or jurisdiction in the United States. It is very important, and those resident services coordinators in the 1970s, and 1980s, were assigned to each one of the projects, and they are part of the funding structure of the project through the low-income housing tax credit program for them to support the stability of those residents in those communities. What does that mean? It means simply that if you are struggling as a resident to pay rent, if you're struggling with some other issues, then you can reach out to your resident services coordinator to find solutions to that. There could be some rent assistance, there could be some rent mitigation, there could be a number of other programs that could help you, to really stay in your home. If you keep moving forward through the slides, that would be great. So that's what our resident service coordinator does. Us, in Hacienda, we provide beyond the resident services coordinators. We provide those after school programs. We provide that, additional capacity building through small business development, or simply through other opportunities, for students to really elevate themselves, including the learning centers that I can talk about that later. So I would ask, myself, and I will always start, by asking the question, why are they trying to do this? And the answer is pretty simple. They are trying to do this, and is including ourselves, to partner with local partners or nonprofit partners for us to have more leverage in that community, for us to bring other services and to add some value. That is the why. And then the why us, it is something that is super important for you guys to answer to yourselves. Why should you partner with these individuals? Why is it that they are picking you to make this happen? Is it really that they see some value in your organization, or is it that simply they are looking to check the box? I would like to think that they see some value. We can all add some value, but there is value, and there is also, real substance value when it comes to creating a partnership. So I would say that if that is the case, you need to really understand whether you're being utilized or you're actually being invited to bring more of capacity building to that particular project. So those are questions that you are, supposed to answer to yourself. Again, if you are not a developer, if you are not a resident service provider, the likelihood is that you are not a resident service provider. So you are not the organization that has to offer that structure, that has that knowledge as to how to navigate, how to do some foreclosure prevention, how to do some eviction prevention, all of those things. So really, you have to understand what is it that you are going to bring into the project, other than just checking the box of being the partner and perhaps collecting a portion of the developer fee. If we go on to the next slide, you'll see that the next step, once you're being approached and once you make the decision to make this happen, you have to understand, what does it mean for you as the nonprofit organization, as the cultural specific organization, or as the local organization that is going to be building that capacity for the developer. So to me, building that capacity is not only limited to what each one of us have to offer in terms of direct services to the new project or the future project, has to do a lot with your knowledge of that particular community and how you can help that developer understand that community to make this project much more inclusive, to understand the needs of the population that you're trying to serve, and to really understand the design needs for that particular project. If you live in a community where there are a lot of singles or elderly people or large families, then you need to understand that. And that kind of knowledge is not easy to come. A lot of the times, we hire some external firms, we try to do some focus groups, and we get some fragmented information on what we need to get for these projects. For us, the most effective tool and the most effective partnerships that we have found is when we partner with local organizations that really know the community for a long time, and not simply with organizations that do this work for a living, community participation or community outreach and that sort of thing. So partnering with organizations that don't necessarily do that, but yet understand the community and know the community, for me, would be one of the most important components that you can bring when selecting you as a developer, an organization, and for the organization itself to understand itself in order to bring those added capacity to the developer. We go to the next slide. So after we have agreed, sometimes I will tell you a quick story. A mainstream large developer, that is a nationwide developer with a chapter here in the state of Oregon, approached us to try to do a deal with them. And their approach was pretty simple, say, let's do this project together. Obviously, I'm not going to mention any names or specifics, but let's do this deal together. Help us to win this project. You bring the services and you collect a 10% of the developer fee. That was their offering. 10% of a developer fee. Let's say that we go into a very optimistic scenario. So you have a $50 million project. You probably will be collecting, I don't know, about $5 to $7 million. Maybe a little more if you go with the max, and depending on where you are, if you're in the Portland metro area, metro will have some restrictions as to how much your developer fee. Remind me, Carlos, 9% right now, I think. Yeah, 9%. Yes. I know. Look, I don't think they have changed the rules. I used to do development myself, and look, since I became a CEO, I haven't done a single pro forma for the past 7 years. So I gotta trust what people tell me these days. I do review some of the deals, but I do review just the overall numbers and not necessarily the specifics. But there are some limitations, right? You can go up to 14% in some jurisdictions. You can also go up to 14% in most states. Part of that developer fee has to be deferred, typically within the ranges of 20%, 40%. The 60% will be a cash developer fee. So you're looking into two pools of money here that you can that you have to think, or you have to at least acknowledge when you are trying to do some of these deals. The issue with having this kind of discussions is that you don't know what you're discussing if you're an organization that doesn't understand this kind of financing. So if you come to me and you tell me I will give you 10% of the developer fee, is that from the entire developer fee? Am I going to have some cash flow being paid over the next 15 years, 30 years, whatever financing structure do we have? Or what is it that we're getting out of this whole thing? So if I am making $5 million, 40%, are going to be deferred. So that brings the cash developer fee to $3 million, and I'm collecting 10%. That is $300,000 that you will be getting. And you won't be getting those $300,000 in one single lump sum. You will be getting when you close the loan, which is typically about a year later, you start, your design phase. If you break ground, in time, maybe a year and a half. Typically, that will be the time frame, and then construction will last, anything between 12 to 24 months, depending what happens and things are moving along the way. So the developer will be making $2,700,000 in cash, while the organization will be getting a lump sum in fractions, through the construction, the project of $300,000. And if you structure this right, then you will be getting some 10% of the cash flow and allowances that you will be getting every single month. That part wasn't offered to us, on the 10%. Needless to say, I said no to that particular deal. I mean, why would I do all of that? And then in addition to doing all of that, they also want, to getting that little bit of money, they also want you to do the community participation. They also want you to bring some of the programming. They want to set the cost and the allowances that you will be getting for your resident service coordinator, which will be about $66,000, which we subsidize those particular salaries, because that kind of money is really not enough. And working under current conditions today, especially with the new residents that we have that are being welcomed by through the PSH program, the Permanent Supported Housing Program, it's becoming a lot more challenging to really manage people and to navigate people through our projects. So it is a huge complication that is very underpaid, for our resident service coordinators. And again, if you're not a developer, you wouldn't really have that history of understanding some of the complications and the complexities that you have to have, when it comes to managing these properties. And you are, basically being put into that box that you will be working with all of these individuals. So you're going to be doing the hard work, the real hard work, and then you're going to be collecting only 3%, $300,000, which I don't think it is that reasonable really for anybody to win a project, in this scenario. All of this money that I mentioned in terms of developer fee, that is the profit that any developer, brings to their coffers, when they are cutting a deal, when they get an award. So so what can we do really to help, organizations that work in this nonprofit, cultural specific or not? What can we do to help them? We put together with Housing Oregon a set of criteria that will help you. I'm going to skip the slides. I'm just going to talk right now. That will help you to understand at least, some of the responsibilities that each one of these developers have, and some of the responsibilities that the cultural specific or nonprofit organization have to bring to the table. So number one, we have to understand that in order to make any of these projects work, you have to have some level of economic net worth that will help you to guarantee the constructions of a project. So let's talk about a $50 million or $20 million project, right? So a $20 million project, just as a regular rule of thumb, will ask you anybody, and Carl is here to tell me if I'm lying or not. He used to work for PhD for quite some time. We have to have some, net worth behind us. So some assets that will guarantee the construction of the project, and some liquid assets or cash that will have to guarantee that construction. Typically will be about 5% for your liquid assets and about 25% for your assets, for your real estate assets or any other kind of asset that will help you to guarantee if something goes south. That is an important formula to remember, to also understand that it's not always just that developers want to keep all of these resources to themselves. It is also that they need to keep some of these accounts very well funded in order for them to continue doing more projects, unless you have a backer. A backer is an organization or bank or whomever that has enough cash, even if they don't have solid assets or real estate assets, that can help you to guarantee the construction as well as the operation of the project, for years to come. So there are two types of guarantees. One of them is the construction guarantee, and the other one will be the operating guarantee. So you have to have some assets there to make sure that the project is, working properly in case something again happens, the roof falls or something terrible happens. You have to relocate the community and so on and so forth. So I have found that some of the interesting thresholds, for us to create good partnerships with developers is to, actually, we should go to the next slide, because I will forget some of the points that I want to make. So, all right, let's go to the next one. All right, so once we agree to partner with a developer, we have to agree also to some of those terms and conditions, right? I would say that if you bring absolutely not much to the table other than services, collecting a 15% developer fee, that is my floor, and we don't do those deals ourselves. We're out of providing just service or partnering for services. We always partner as co-developers and co-owners of the property ourselves, right? But if you were to do this simply as a service provider, a 15% fee is not going to break the bank, for the developer at all. It will be a significant cash windfall, for the organization. When you get $50,000, $100,000, many organizations are really excited because they are important resources for those organizations that don't have a huge budget. But for organizations or developers that have a significant budget, 15% or $450,000 is really not a huge amount on that scenario that I mentioned earlier. but it will be a significant amount for the developer. And I would carry that 15% through the life of the project. So if there is any cash flow that is positive, then I, would encourage all of you to really try to seek some of that, cash advances that you could utilize for your organization to support your operation, or to subsidize, some of your resident services, or to augment, some of the additional services that you may want to bring to that particular project. That will not only increase your own capacity, but also will increase your ability to provide services, across the board, even if that means to have a little more stuff, on the table. So the great majority in these particular deals that pays absolutely everything, it will be the developer. They will be investing on all pre-development, design, construction, up to closing. The partner that doesn't have the resources would not be having any financial responsibility on this type of deals. They will be working simply in supporting and informing the project as it needs to happen. Now, if we go to the next slide, I say that we need to understand also where all of these resources are coming from. For the state of Oregon, obviously, each one of the jurisdictions, in this case, one of the ones that has had the most resources recently has been the Portland Housing Bureau, as well as the Metro regional government. Most of those dollars are gone. I think Metro is going to release in their final allocations by 2024, and they will be spent by 2026. We are, in fact, currently working and exploring a new bond, for the Metro region. I don't know if we're going to be successful or not, but we're really excited, and we need to continue doing this work, because even though we're going to be exceeding our Metro housing unit goals, we promised about 3,900 units. I was part of those committees, and we are going to reaching, once we're completed, about 4,700 units altogether in the region. So that is a significant, addition of units in the Portland Metro region, in the Tri-County region, but it's not enough. We continue to have a few thousand people in the streets every night, and it is just unattainable for us to continue having this kind of situation happening. So hopefully we can pass that bond, and hopefully we can continue doing this kind of work that is becoming more and more complicated as interest rates are extremely high. And part of the financing that you see right here is loans. So the rest of the money, OHCS and other bonds, are subsidies that are coming for us to make these projects work. Everybody knows this, right? We could be building them. The cost will be about the same. Well, this is a little higher, but the market is too full, and we don't need for now. We need to continue doing some of that, but not too much. Affordable housing is a little more complicated. So be bringing some or some equity beyond the tax credits that you get. And that becomes complicated. That is money that you have to pay back. So we also have to understand the complexities, so we can give some credit to these developers that they are also taking the highest risk, when putting all of these together. Let's go to the next slide. So when it comes to the decision-making process, I have, many formulas in different projects that we have done in partnership. And it is a tricky balance here, because some developers and some organizations are really protective of their own communities, and they find themselves, crashing against the wall because the developer in their contracts didn't allow them to have any decision-making power in terms of, what units go here, what kind of amenities that this project should have, what kind of, open space or closed space, computer rooms, playgrounds, you name it, those places should have. So we have to make sure that everything that we do as a small organization, that many of these components, or all of them, depending on what you want, are included and spelled out as to what kind of decision power, where will your input will be taken seriously and contractually, because words, can be, they are gone with the wind. So we need to place this in writing. So these projects, can be fully, not only funded, but also fully informed by the organization that we partner with in the first place, because they have the knowledge and the community on their side. So we have all of these, is in place, including the selection of the property management company. There are very few organizations that do their own property management. One of them is Rich CDC in town. The other one is Bridge Housing, although they do a blend. Most of their management is through their own, property management company. But sometimes when they don't have the capacity in certain jurisdictions, they bring a different partner to do some of this property management. Properties management is like the Coca-Cola business. It's paid by the project based on how much the project brings in. And also, it has a very limited margin of profit. So our salaries in that particular side of the project as a whole are very limited. And sometimes, and most of the time, frankly, all property management companies struggle to provide high quality services and to retain staff that can build that, institutional knowledge in your projects. And yet there are some others that find different ways to make these projects a lot more efficient in terms of, keeping these projects, safe, keeping these projects well maintained, keeping these projects, give you one example. You could design a project in which you have 3 different garbage sections in your project, 108 unit project. That means that your garbage company is going to quote for you 3 different pickups, for that garbage. And you may think that that is not that much, but it will be about almost $100,000 a year for the collection of that garbage in that particular project. So you're looking at almost $1,000 per resident in expenses, for that garbage pickup. So design will have a significant impact in the cost of your project. So when you involve, knowledgeable and experienced property management companies, they can also be informing you as to some of these design changes that are challenging for them to manage your property, and also increase costs, reduce costs, or are really safe, in terms of maintaining costs stable. So really helping you, or you helping people to understand these property management companies, will be super important for you to keep your project flowing nicely and bringing a little more cash. That cash will reflect also into better, profits for the PM. So all of these, things, you have to spell them out in your contract if you really want to have a winning project that will be successful in the future. Let's go to the next slide. So, all right. I was already talking about who manages the property. So the property will be managed primarily by the property management company. The property management company takes care of the, bricks and mortar and bones of that place. So they will change the range that was broken. They will fix the roof when it's not there. They will do the lease up. They will do evictions. They will do onboarding, all of those things. They will deliver notices. And then you have your resident service coordinator. So you have to get along with that property management company. In some cases, I have seen this happen already. You have, the developer that is struggling with either resident services or struggling with the property management company, that then brings a lot of stress to the relationship between those 2 different organizations, the nonprofit organization doing the resident service and programming, and the property management doing the actual maintenance and operations of the property. I have lived that myself, with some properties, and it's just complicated. And even though we're owners or co-owners of some of these properties, it is really difficult to offboard any property management company. Unwinding all of these agreements that are multi-year agreements, plus, passing along all the accounting and financing of those projects to a different property management, it's a nightmare. So I really encourage all of you to really be very, very specific when you are the one that are going to be on the ground, and this is a nonprofit organization, to be part of these agreements and to be part of these selections of the property management companies, as well as other partners that will be working in those projects. Let's go to the next slide. Finally, I gotta say that these partnerships, if you are a co-developer and co-owner, which is another portion that I didn't mention earlier, will last for a long, long time. So even though you will have, organizations that will become co-owners today, their CEO or executive director won't be there tomorrow, you need to make sure that you are leaving a good legacy, that you will be manageable for years and years to come. The shortest partnership that you will find will be a 15-year partnership under a low-income housing tax rate plain deal. But there are many others that are being, extended for years, 30 years or 60 years, depending on the requirements and of funding that are required for us to stay affordable for that long. I would also say that if you add more capacity than just the service provider portion of it, and if you have ambitions to be a developer, to really think of being not just a recipient of portion of the developer fee, but also to cut a deal to be a part co-owner, so co-developer and co-owner on the same percentage that is reflected in your agreement. It could be at 10%, it could be up to 30%. I wouldn't push too much farther than 30%, because that starts to stress out a little bit some of the significant wins that developers have to bring to their table in order for them to keep being fluid for years to come. But let's say that you go with a 20%, so middle ground. 20% on a 200-unit apartment complex will give you 40 units that then you could leverage in the future if your partnership is very well developed, for you to have some guarantees in terms of assets or net worth. And that should also give you some additional income for you to start building those coffers to have some liquidity. The liquidity itself is not as crucial as the net worth. The liquidity itself, you could always find, a social investor or somebody that might be interested in working with you to develop you as a developer and provide some of those guarantees, at least for the construction phase of it. And then for the actual, operating of the project, in some cases, depending on your agreement with your tax credit investors, you could also offer the property as a guarantee. It is unlikely, but it has happened, and it's happening more and more as more equity and racial justice, takes place in some of these deals, where on the financing side, that is a very slow moving ball, but they are reducing some of those guarantee requirements. They are reducing some of the liquidity requirements, and they are also offering, some of that liquidity in terms of being the backers as the ones that I have in Arizona that continue to support our projects, left and right. With that said, I will end there. If you want a backup of some of these agreements, and I have a few of them, would be more than happy to provide those offline. They won't have any names, but they will have percentages. They will have the structure. They will have my name or the name of the organization that we partner with. But I will be more than happy to do that. Also, other things that I can offer to you is that if you are interested in doing this in the future, I will be more than happy to meet with each one of you and also work with our attorneys. I am not an attorney, so I'm not giving you legal advice, but I am telling you some of the stuff that we have been able to work out, up to 30% in some of those deals. Currently in Hacienda, we're trying to not do more partnerships like this. We did them in order for us to borrow capacity, to build capacity when we didn't have it. Now we have a full real estate development department. We're building more experience. We have more assets than we ever did before. And we have significant cash and equity investors, not on the low income, not on the LIHTC side, but equity investors that are supporting our projects, in any range, basically, that we want to do. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to take any. Yes. It is very unlikely to happen. All depends on what there are two phases on the legal agreements. One of them will be an MOU, that can be binding or not at the very beginning, which you agree to the overall terms. And then you get into a co-development agreement and cooperating agreement that will be at a later phase, not very far, from that point. But your MOU has to be ironclad and has to be very specific. So your co-development agreement and your cooperating agreement, operating agreement can be based on that MOU that has to be pretty solid. I will highly recommend that you work with some of the attorneys that we have worked in the past before to make sure that you have those negotiations very, very solidly established. Yes. Yes, that is an excellent point, Emily. And I want to stress, I said in so many words, the selecting the partner, you as the developer and you as the partner that is being selected, you have to understand as to why they are selecting you and why us. Why is because, it's a requirement in some cases, and the why us is what do we have to offer. But that community participation piece is central. It's absolutely central to the selection of that partner, that local partner, that nonprofit organization, that organization, because without them, we couldn't really understand the community. Now, for the nonprofit partner or the social partner, I think it would be significant for them to outline the importance of along the way for them to inform the project, the needs of the project and the needs of the future programming that will happen in that place. And they have to come in really well equipped with a budget, for that particular process, and don't let that go. I mean, we include all of that into our projects. There is absolutely no way that we're going to be doing a project without that heavy investment in community participation. I can tell you a story that includes our former president, Donald Trump. He tried to come to the Billmore area in Arizona years and years ago to do a tower. They didn't care about doing any community participation. Granted, this was not for low-income people, but they didn't include all of these people that were going to have or were going to be impacted by the project, including some of the services that we're going to be providing that project. That project was taken down by the community itself because they didn't include anyone. So there are two phases, or two parts that I see community participation playing a role. The most significant one is informing the project and informing the programming that you will have in the future. And the third one that is just as important, yet I don't like to put it in the front, is that community participation, that community involvement, that information that we're getting from the community is building support for the project. We have seen projects going down because we are just planting stuff along the way and the community doesn't like it. They don't want to see it there. Whether it's the height, whether it's the design, whether it's the population that is going to be living in these projects, they simply don't want to see it. So that community participation has to be a solid ask, from the nonprofit organization for them to fund it directly as a condition. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But they have to make it a condition. Yes. Assuming that the nonprofit organization wants to do development in the future, I think that if the developer is also on the social side, not necessarily being a nonprofit organization, but let's say a big corp or whatever, and they hear that they have these desires to be a developer in the future, I think it will be important for them to enter into an agreement that is co-development as well as co-owners, number one, so you can build some of that network. Secondly, to engage and fund, we have done this. We are funding some partners, staff members that work in our office under our roof with our development team to be trained as project managers, primarily on the financing side. So affordable housing finance is perhaps the most complex piece of the puzzle when it comes to managing any of these projects, and compliance, obviously, when you're managing the construction. But that's a little easier to understand than stacking all of these projects, knowing where the money is located, and trying to find and stacking all of these packages to build the project. So what you can do is simply, bring this to the forefront, invite somebody to live in your house, for the life of the project, and then release this person. The risk there is that we have seen before is that some of these people end up being offered much more money by an other developer that is already, doing development, and then they end up not coming back to a nonprofit organization. If that is a risk that any nonprofit organization is going to be taking, because you cannot retain anybody by force, right? But what you can do is to try to work with the developer to keep funding or do other projects in the future, at least two, to build that capacity internally with your nonprofit organization or organization, cultural specific organization. And that way, that will give you at least 6 to 8 years of capacity building within your nonprofit organization to build that development capacity. You will have some assets. The cash liquid issue, you will have to find some investor that is willing to bet on you to make this happen. And they are there. There's a few of them that are really investing heavily across the United States. I am lucky to have a few of those friends, and they've been supporting a lot of efforts. So, yes. I would say that this organization, Housing Oregon, will be your first stop, because we, well, I used to be on the board. The organization keeps a good track of all the projects that are happening across the state. I would venture and even discuss this with the board of directors of Housing Oregon, as well as with Brian, to have a repository of what projects are happening, instead of sending you through the OHCS site or PHB and trying to find all of this information, but having that depository and see which one of these organizations are looking for partners or how you can approach them. It's not always that straightforward, right? If you are a service organization, you are typically not the active partner. You are the one that is waiting to be invited to the dance, right? So if you want to be the active partner in this relationship, I would say that you have to start building, a connection with some of these developers as you see them coming in. Typically, when they come into a proposal already, they already have identified all of these projects. So you have to be extremely proactive to build a relationship for you to have a pipeline as a service provider in the future, because likely you won't be a partner today if you were not invited, but you can start building that relationship for next year or the following year or the following year. Yes. If the nonprofit partner becomes the owner at the end in a partnership? All right, so that it is very unlikely that a developer will agree to that. So if you're guaranteeing the project as the mainstream developer, as the funding developer, if you do most of the work, if you mature this property to its 15 or 30 years, the likelihood of them relinquishing or making you the first, right of refusal partner, uh, it is very unlikely. It happens, all right? It has happened, and it has happened already here in this state. These partnerships are really new, and I have seen them happening only in nonprofit to nonprofit, partnerships. So a bigger nonprofit with a bigger, basket of money, will relinquish the project to the nonprofit partner. So when a partnership is completed, when the entire deal and the structure of the whole thing, 15 years later, 30 years later, all of that is gone. So you don't have any restrictions. You have a few options, when your project matures to that level. You can sell the project, you can recapitalize the project into more affordable housing, or you can also transfer the project to your partner. You could transfer the project to your partner for a minimum amount, or at least, for a portion in reverse now to the mainstream developer when you apply for new low-income housing tax rates for you to revitalize and remodel and bring, back that property in line. But I haven't seen any of those projects yet mature, but they are being structured today, and it is possible. So, yes. And this is not when they are already in a partnership, or this is within the partnership? Right. Yeah, I mean, there are a few pools of money that can help you to do that. One of them that has been, well, right now, it seems that Meyer is taking a break, from developing new programs, but they had a really robust program in terms of capacity building for development companies. Right now, LISC, that I mentioned earlier, Enterprise and others are really interested in bringing development capacity to different organizations. Raza Development Fund in Arizona has that program in which they are investing significant dollars for you to build that internal capacity. So they are bringing that money to you, and it is specific to real estate development, both on the commercial side and the affordable housing side. So I would, and these programs are very current, they are ongoing. They are very focused on either nonprofit organizations or developers of color. And I think that would be an important pool for you to tackle. And I can also send information on that space because I've been part of a beneficiary of that. And once you get into the agreement with the developer, I wouldn't be shy in asking for them to fund a position within their organization that will be working for you in the future. That is the best way for you to really learn how to do real estate development. Yes. The answer, structurally, no. In terms of creative structures, yes. So we have found many of these parts, by working with to creating some efficiencies, as well as also building some advocacy on the project itself that is crucial for us to make that project happen on the community participation side. And then we build that budget in addition to whatever we have on architectural fees or whatever, to make, to bring that to life. In terms of actually having all the bits and pieces, I do have all the bits and pieces on a contract that I can share, again, blackout, without any specifics. And you can see each one of these line items as to how they are being worked out. With a cautionary tale on this end, I wouldn't take any of these points as the final points. You have to define, your level of depth and investment as a nonprofit organization or partner to the bigger development company. What is it that you want to get out of this whole thing? That is the why, us, and what do we want of this partnership. And I would, again, stress that if we are, with these partnerships, which was the intention of OHCS, to create more wealth, to create a little bit more of a fair distribution of resources, that we think of within those lines, developers won't be poor. We complain all the time that they are putting more and more restrictions, that we don't make enough, that they are asking us for too many guarantees and so on and so forth. The reality is that we make a lot of money. So sharing some of those resources is really not a deal breaker, for any developers. Now, what is a deal breaker should be on your bucket. You need to understand what you want to do. Community participation, it's a non-negotiable. And I would say that that part has to stay in place. If you don't want to be an owner and deal with, disposition of these properties in the future, or agreements or negotiations to exit a partnership in the future, then don't be a co-owner, just be a co-developer and collect that fee. If you want to be and build that capacity in the future, be the co-owner, the co-developer, and then bring some of the resources to your office or their office so they can train people for you. There are many of ways to do these deals. None of them will be exactly the same. It will depend on each one of the organizations. For the developer itself, really doesn't make a huge difference. For the organization, the smaller one, it does. So knowing yourself and what your goals are, it is super important before you get, through the same door with these people. So, all right, thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we.